Sorry for stepping in there, Martin. I come over here so often as part of the consortium work that I feel at home here and feel like I belong. I did have some slides just to tell you about the National Forum, but we don't want to upset the technology, so I'll just briefly say a few words about it. It's great to have you all here, and this seminar is yet another seminar in this inaugural series of National Forum seminars. And the theme is Teaching for Transitions, and this one we're looking at the transition to higher education and the challenges involved in that. The National Forum was established to put into place plans to enhance the higher education in Ireland and to make it an outstanding system here in line with international best practice. The National Forum has a board that's comprised of teaching and learning experts, and it also has a panel of international advisors. And following a series of consultations around the country, and I'm sure some of you were involved in those, it put together a set of priorities and put together an action plan. And it decided that it would look at real issues and areas that people wanted to focus on. So it came up with various themes, enhancement themes. So the theme for this year is Teaching for Transitions, hence this series of seminars. If you would like to find out more information about the work of the National Forum, they have a website, www.teachingandlearning.ie, and you will find more information there about it. But I don't want to delay Ivan any further, so I hand you over to Ivan, who's going to deliver the keynote speech. And I've got a sign-up sheet circulating, so can you make sure you sign it at some stage? Okay, thank you.
For the Teaching Awards, because he gives excellent feedback as part of that process. Ivan works as an independent consultant. I think he's free, but he has a very good CV in the area of higher education. So he's been working independently as a consultant in the higher education sector since 2003, and that's probably why, you know, he's 80, but he looks much younger. Joking. So he, before he cut loose and became an independent consultant, he had just completed 5 years as Director of Teaching and Learning at the Universities of Wolverhampton and Portsmouth. His career began in higher education as a lecturer in engineering, I think in the area of electronics, at the University of Ulster. And there, over a 10-year period, he developed extensive experience in that area, working with students, and he became the Assistant Director of Educational Development. Ivan subsequently became Director of the Centre for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Sheffield Hallam in 2007, and he then moved to the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2010 to work on the National Higher Education STEM programme. Ivan's currently an associate of the Higher Education Academy, for whom he delivers a consultancy in a number of areas of higher education development. In terms of consultancy, there's a long list. He's worked with major universities in the UK, Sheffield Hallam, Nottingham Trent, Manchester, Sheffield, the UK Engineering Council. He's worked with, in Ireland, UCD, our Shannon Consortium institutions, Sligo Institute of Technology. He's worked in Australia and Egypt and Thailand, and I'm leaving out many more, no doubt. So, obviously, Ivan has extensive experience in the area of higher education, and he has particular experience in change management at a senior institutional level, and his particular interests are in developing strategies for learning and teaching, promoting inquiry-based learning, fostering innovation, and student assessment. Much of his development work involves supporting both staff and student groups in maintaining reflective journals, and we know his great contribution, as I say, in relation to our reflective portfolio process. Ivan has 80 plus publications in the area of teaching and learning, so if you look him up, I'm sure you'll be able to follow up on many of those. So we're delighted that he's going to give our keynote to frame our theme on learner independence and innovative pedagogy. So I'll hand over now to Ivan Moore and thank him again for being with us.
Thank you. It's got to be downhill from now on. It's a delight to be here, to be back here again. I was in Limerick just in January doing some work with Mary Immaculate, and I had a great time then. I went out for a walk last night. It was interesting to say Limerick hasn't changed much since January, which is fine, except that the weather hasn't changed much since January either. But let's hope it'll improve in the next few weeks or so. I've been asked to try and stay close to this microphone because of the streaming, so if I do wander off, I'm sure someone will give me a wave and tell me to get back in behind this. So I apologise for being at the back of this. We've also had a few technical issues this morning, so I hope they've been resolved and I hope this works. I'm going to be using two different systems, and this first system I have never used before. So this is fun. I don't know if any of you have used Prezi. Yeah, so good. If I get stuck, you can help me out. Yes? Okay. I was asked to talk about skills for transition to higher education environments, and you've seen the title on the screen there for long enough, so you know what I'm talking about, hopefully, and you know who I am. Yes, this isn't going to work terribly well, is it? Let's see if we can find the next one. Yeah, that's better. I want to start by asking you how you learn. So just think for a moment or two about something you're good at. Don't tell me what it is. It would be embarrassing. But think of something that you think you're quite good at. And just turn to the person beside you and discuss how you came to be good at it. Okay, let me just stop you there, please, if I may. Would anybody like to volunteer any ways at which they became good? Yes, thank you. Practice. Thank you. Deliberate practice. There we go. We're going to add words to that, are we? There's one here. Dire necessity. That's the reason why. But how did you become good at it? Feedback.
By experiencing successive tasks.
Successive tasks, experiencing successive tasks. Yes, thank you. Okay. Let me ask you, thank you, that'll do us for the moment. Something you're not good at. Now, don't be modest. Think of something you're not good at. Why not? Okay, is there anyone who hasn't offered me anything yet who'd like to give me a response to that? Why not? Anyone like to start me off? Why are you not good at it? Fear. Nice one.
Poor experience, negative experience.
Negative experience.
Being involved in an environment that said they were trying to teach you to do it, but actually they were only looking for the ones who were good.
Can I paraphrase that? Bad teaching. Impatience. Okay, thank you. Those are really good. And finally, how do you know you're good at something? Feedback. Are we going to get anything else? Success. Sorry? Benchmark. Yeah. Yeah. Generally, I have to stay here, sorry. Generally, we get to be good at things by practicing them, by doing them again and again and again. And it's about us doing them. Things that we're not good at, we tend to put down to lack of interest or motivation or bad teaching. So generally we put down good things to our own efforts and bad things to other people. And we know we're good at things because we get feedback. One of the things, I think some of you mentioned it, this idea of trying something again and again and again, is you need to have the confidence and the determination to keep trying. And one of the ways of getting that confidence is by getting positive feedback to help you try again. Whoops. Yeah, nice one. Well done. I don't need to tell you who he is or anything about him. It was Samuel Beckett who said it. And that's how we learn. We try something, we fail. We try again, we fail better. And we go round that cycle again and again and again. Each time we get better at it until at some point we feel we're as good as we want to be or as good as our motivation will drive us, depending on what else it is we want to learn. And that's the important cycle that we should be trying, I think, to introduce when students come into university, of encouraging them to learn things for themselves, to develop their skills, their attitudes, and to get by doing that by giving them the motivation to keep trying and the feedback that they're getting better, that they're improving them, and helping them to think about where their skills are and how they might go about improving. So I said in the title in the abstract that I would talk about a 10-point plan for developing learner independence. But I want to start by looking at two concepts that are in the title. Learning journey and innovative pedagogy. As educators, most of us think that learning is about the journey. We see this journey for the student, and because we see students coming into university and progressing through it, we see the journey, we see the development. It's a kind of a hackneyed phrase, but that's the journey that we see for our students. The students don't all see it that way. They see it as the outcome. They see it as the goal, the destination. They want to get marks for an assignment. They want to get a degree. They want to get a qualification. We see the journey. They don't. And that's something that I think, again, we can address as soon as the students come into university, talking to them about that development. So what's the learning journey look like? For me, it's a journey, a learning journey, and it's a journey from dependence, relative dependence, because they've come mostly through a school system which has encouraged them to become dependent on the teacher. And what we're trying to do is help them to become independent as learners, or what we like to call autonomous. We're trying to encourage autonomous learners. One of the problems is that from day one when they come in, this is what they experience. And we actually develop in them learned helplessness. And that can often come through the way we go about teaching them. We provide them with all of the resources, we provide them with the information, we tell them things, we help them. When we ask questions and they're quiet for a moment or two, we tell them the answers. And they learn that if they sit there quietly, we will tell them. And they learn to become helpless in that way as learners. Another model that you might think about is growth. If you think of education or the learning as a three-dimensional concept, we deal with a knowledge base, depending on the subject. And that knowledge base, there's a breadth to it and a complexity to it. And as they move from one level to the next, they're dealing with more and more knowledge, more and more information, and it's becoming much more complex for them. Similarly, accountability. When they graduate at the end of their career, we would expect them to be independent, autonomous, accountable learners. And that's another growth factor. And the third one is about intellectual processes. We would expect more of an intellectual input to what they do in their final year than we would when they come into university. But we can't just hope that that happens. We need to create learning environments that give them the practice, the experience of doing these things and of learning those skills as they go through. And that, again, needs to start from the day they come into the university in their first weeks of their experience. But, of course, being an engineer and an academic, I always feel I should try and define the terms that I'm using. So when I talk about innovative pedagogy, what am I talking about? Pedagogue is a Greek, comes from Greek. It's a servant who led the child to school. They literally, physically took the children to school. And that's where the term comes from. And it suggests education is something about taking somebody somewhere. And it's about transmission of accumulated knowledge from one person to another. To innovate means to renew or change. It could be a process, technology, or ideas. So for me, when we're talking about innovative pedagogy, we're talking about how we personally renew our approach to teaching. And if we're not interested in developing our teaching or our approaches to teaching, then we're going to be doing the same things again and again, and the students aren't going to benefit from the way we enhance our teaching and their learning. Lachana was quoted a while ago as saying that teachers have shifted from being a subject matter expert who transmits information to acting as a facilitator of student learning. So it's this move away from being the person, the repository of the information, the knowledge. I know all these things and I'm passing them all on to you, the sage on the stage. And he talks about teachers developing the students' capabilities. Fortunately, Colin Smith made an important correction to that and said it's not about us developing their skills. Our role is to support them in developing themselves. And that's the concept that I would hold to in higher education, is that the students are there to learn, but they're not learning on their own. They're learning with our guidance, with our support, with our facilitation. I came across this a couple of weeks ago. Thomas Edison, you'll all know Thomas Edison. And he felt that learners will come to understand concepts by viewing pictures in motion, he called it. Sorry about the typo there, I've just seen it. Pictures in motion. Of course, back in that day, that's what they had. But we could replace that kind of terminology with video, animation. We can think of tablets, netbooks, and smartphones that we have today. But that was his concept. No longer reliant on textbooks. Oh yeah? That was 100 years ago. And we're still using the written word as the main means of transmitting information and knowledge from one person to another. And the message there is that the technologies may change, but the innovation in pedagogy can bring about lasting benefits. And also that pedagogic innovation is slow. It takes time to develop new pedagogies, certainly at institutional level. And part of the reason for that is the framework of higher education doesn't lend itself to rapid change. Our quality assurance processes tend to encourage things to stay much the same so they can be measured from one year to the next. And because we're largely risk averse. So if we want to innovate in our pedagogy, it's difficult and it's slow and it takes time. But you need to try You need to fail, you need to try again, and you need to fail better. And you need to find some way of keeping motivated in doing that. Just want you to think for a minute, what are your learning goals for this seminar, the whole morning? Just pause for a moment, think about 1 or 2 goals you have for today. Maybe just jot them down. There are 2 or 3 parallel seminars you'll be able to watch or join in on 2 of them through the rest of the morning. So what have you come here for? What are you hoping to get out of this morning? What are your goals? And while you're doing that, I'm going to swap technologies, I hope. And this is where the technology defeats us again. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully you've thought about that. Because you're investing a significant amount of time coming here this morning. You want to think, what do I want to get out of this? And now, hopefully, if you've thought a little bit more about it, throughout the rest of the morning, you'll be able to focus on what you want to get out of it and drive that learning for yourselves, rather than just becoming passive and receiving the wisdom of the people who are running the workshops for you. What are my goals? I'm hoping in this session that we'll develop some kind of a shared understanding of how students learn. We've started to do that already. And how their conceptions influence their approaches to learning and how they have different learning styles. But also how our teaching conceptions and our approaches to teaching can influence the way they learn. And I want at the end, if I have time, to demonstrate some of these practices with a couple of quick case studies. There's a few terms that we come across in education development. Just scan down through those. How many of them are you familiar with? How would you score yourself? Take any of them you like. Learning styles. You've never heard of it? You've heard of it, but you don't really know what it is. Some idea what it means, not too clear. You have a clear idea what it means, and you can explain it. Where do you think you might sit on that? What about assessment criteria and standards? What about approaches to learning? Let's try another page. I came across those terms when I was preparing for this in a document from the Open University, and I have to say that my responses were 1 or 2 for most of them. So hopefully that will make you feel a bit more comfortable. But I hadn't heard of some of those before at all, and some of them I kind of had heard of or had an idea that I thought I might know what they mean. But those are the innovative pedagogies that the Open University has identified for the future. But let's look at this 10-point plan. I think the first thing that we need to do when students arrive at university is establish clear goals, clear standards, and clear processes. They come into university, they expect it to be different from the learning they've had in the past, whether that's work-based, whether it's school-based, or wherever it's come from. They expect the learning at university to be different, but they don't know what it is. And we don't tell them. So we need to explain to them that it's different. We need to explain to them about the intellectual development that we expect from them. That it's not just about learning facts and information and repeating that back. It's about being able to analyse, make judgments, synthesise things, design things, bring things together. And that requires the development of information skills, so that we will expect them to go and find information themselves. That they can't expect the information always to come from us. We would expect a degree of autonomy. We will expect them to work on their own or collaboratively with other students and not to be relying on us. We may be working with them in groups and so on. And we need to spend some time when they come in establishing that kind of learning environment. Even if you're the only one doing it, it's important that they know what it is you're trying to achieve with them and what you expect of them from day one. It often takes students years to figure out what's expected of them. Okay. It's gone. I had a paper bag with me here a while. It's over there. Someone very kindly tidied it up for me. I went into town last night to get some snacks. Just feeling a bit hungry, and the shop very kindly put them into a paper bag for me, and I thought, how environmentally friendly. That's really nice to see. If you went into a shop, a supermarket, and you bought some goods, and they offered you the choice of a paper bag or a plastic bag, which would you choose, and why? It rains in Limerick, okay. Just think about that for a moment. Of course, when we talk about plastic bags, we think of images like that. And possibly even worse images. You think of a paper bag. Do you think of images like that? $14 million trees were cut down purely to make paper bags for America in 1 year. 14 million. Most people have the concept that plastic bags are not environmentally friendly, and paper is, because it's renewable, it's a renewable resource. But it's not that simple. Most of the big supermarket chains now provide plastic bags that biodegrade within 3 months. So if you've got anything in a plastic bag in your garage and you've had it there for more than a few months, you might want to go in and make sure that it's still there, because it's made from starch and it biodegrades. But most of us have this concept about plastic bags being bad, paper bags being good. Why am I doing this? Because we need to help the students to build on what they already know, or what they already think they know. It doesn't matter whether they get it right or wrong. The point is, you have a starting point. And quite often when students come into higher education, they have to unlearn things. That may be unlearning knowledge or information that they've got wrong, that has been presented to them wrong. One of the things that happens in school is that an effective teacher will make things simple. And in making things simple, they introduce errors and they get it wrong. So we may have to help the students unlearn things. That may also be conceptions. I'm no good at X, Y, or Z. I find maths difficult. or I'm no good at music, or whatever it is. And they may have to unlearn that concept, and you need to help them unlearn it. And the other thing is, it's complex. Higher education is complex. It's not simple. And there could be a huge debate about whether plastic is better than paper or not. It's a very complex argument. And students need to grasp the fact that when they come into higher education, the concepts they're dealing with are complex. And they may have some initial ideas about them, but that's where you start, and you can build on those and develop those. It's useful if you can help them to understand themselves and also to understand you. How many of you would answer 3 or 4 to VARC? Have you heard of VARC before? No? Okay. I flew in yesterday to Limerick Airport and I have to go back again tomorrow evening. If you were heading back to to Shannon Airport, and you didn't know the way, how would you go about finding out how to get there? Would you go to Google and print a map? Follow the map? Would you go to Google and download the written instructions and follow them? Would you ask someone, would you say, how do I get to Limerick? Or how do I get to Shannon Airport? And they could explain to you, well, you go down to the bridge, turn left over the bridge, etc., and you'd carry that and you'd say, okay, but is that the first junction in the roundabout or the second one? Okay, right, and clarify things with them. Or would you just get in the car and look for road signs and follow the road signs? Which would be your preferred option? Or would you use a mixture of them? Get the bus. It won't fit your car. If you use a map, you tend to be a visual learner. You like diagrams, you like pictures, you like charts, you like images, you like photographs. When you're taking notes, you draw little lines between things. You draw shapes, mind maps and that kind of thing. You think visually. If you like to talk to people or explain to people, or you like people to explain to you and you like to question them, to clarify things, you're an auditory learner, that's your preference. Or you might be read-write if you like to follow written guidelines or instructions or read textbooks or notes or whatever. And people who like to get up and do things are called kinesthetic learners, and that's VARC, V-A-R-K. It talks about those 4 basic preferred ways of learning. So again, you might want to think about students coming in the first year and think about their different learning styles. And they will have a range of them, or you will see a range of them across the students. And you need to be able to work with each of them. You need to be able to provide visual stimulus for visual learners, written material for read-write learners. You need to engage discussion for auditory learners. And you need to get them to do things if they're kinesthetic. But also, you need to think about yourself. If you're a visual learner, you will probably be a visual teacher. You will use lots of images and lots of diagrams and lots of pictures, but you're not exploiting the other 3 forms of teaching and learning. So you might be teaching in a very focused way according to your preferred style, which may not suit a lot of the students in the class. So you need to think, how can I broaden the range of ways I interact with the students and provide them with resources, information, motivation, stimulation. So that's VARC's Stance to Learning. Honey and Mumford, have you come across Honey and Mumford? Yep, some of you come across that. I'll come back to that shortly. And they talk about 4 different learning styles, preferred learning styles. Martin and Saljo talks about conceptions of learning. They talk about surface and deep conceptions of learning and of teaching. Not going to talk about those, but it's something that I'm offering out that you might be motivated to go and look up and think a little bit more about before you go back to your teaching again. The 4th point is about moving from teaching the information, the knowledge transmission, to helping the students develop their information skills and their research skills. Information skills. Understanding what they already know about something, identifying the information they need to find, finding it, evaluating it, using it, and communicating it to others. Research skills, being able to define their own lines of inquiry. This is what I need to research, this is what I need to find out, and being able to go and do that. They may be large scale that take place over several weeks, or it may be something small that they would do within a class. I don't know if you've come across Sconnell's 7 Pillars of Information Literacy. The Society of College, National and University Librarians, and that's how they identify information literacy. It starts by recognizing that you have a personal information need. If you have a problem to solve or something to do, you need to find the information. Knowing what you already know about it, scoping it, planning strategies for locating information, gathering, locating and accessing that information, evaluating it, managing the information and presenting it, applying it, synthesizing new knowledge. So if you're shifting away from teaching students things to helping them find the information and learn how to find that information for themselves and use it and apply it. Motivation. You need the willing to learn. You talked about earlier about things that you're good at, and it's by trying again and again and again, and each time you fail, you try again, you get better, you identify where you've gone wrong, you get better. There are 2 different types of motivation that we talk about, extrinsic and intrinsic. It can be motivation because of the subject or because of the process of learning. You can make learning fun, even if the subject might be a little bit dry. How can you? There are always ways of trying to teach it in a more energetic, more enthusiastic, more fun way. So how can we develop that motivation? Providing realistic challenges is very useful. Ask the students to do something that initially they think, that sounds difficult. But with a little bit of support, a little bit of help, a little bit of encouragement, they do it. They achieve it. They feel good about that, especially when they get that feedback that makes them feel good. Then you can take them on to the next task, which is maybe a little bit more difficult again. So each time you're stretching them just a little bit, and when they have that success, they're more motivated to go forward with the next challenge. Varying the locus of control, giving them opportunities to choose what they will investigate, how they will investigate it, how they will present it, how they will feed back to you, what kind of mode of assessment they would prefer. Offering feedback and support, and not just from you, but encouraging or developing opportunities in the class for students to work in groups and encouraging the other students in the group to provide feedback. Students are quite often much more direct and much more positive in the way they feed back to other students than we are. For some reason, we can become quite negative and quite hard in the feedback that we give students. But the students are much more positive when they're feeding back to their colleagues. Share the learning, even the failures. It's much easier to take a failure if you share that with a group of people who failed with you. You can have that group hug and move on from that much more easily than you can if you did something on your own and it didn't work for you. And socialize the learning. You may be familiar with the work of Vygotsky. He talks about both the realistic challenges and the social constructivism. Again, it's something you can find out for yourselves afterwards if you like, if you're interested in that. What we call authentic learning, and by that I mean something that is personally meaningful to the student, rather than giving them abstract issues, topics, scenarios, problems to deal with, things that don't really mean anything to them, asking them to look at or investigate things that are meaningful to them. Things like live projects. By live project, I mean projects that are actually happening out there in business, in schools, in industry, depending on the subject that you're teaching. If you're teaching engineering, bring in a practicing engineer. Let them talk about the problems they're dealing with in their factory and have the students work on those. Education, that's a lot easier, I think, because you can work with schools, you can work with school teachers on real problems that they're addressing in the school. Those are real live problems, and have the students investigate those and come up with solutions. Using upper year students, second or final year students, working with first year students as buddies, as study supporters, study skills supporters, as team leaders, group leaders in projects. They've been through experiences in the past, they've been successful, they can come back in their second or third year and work with the first year students, provides them with a role model, provides them with feedback and support, coming in a different way from the kind of support and feedback that you would give them. Student-selected projects, and I'll talk about that again in one of the case studies. So having the students select the project, the investigation of the problem that they're going to work on. You can scope it, you can give a general field of where you want this to be, but you can organise them into groups and say, you identify your own investigation. You look at the thing you want to investigate and go off and do that with your support. One of the key things that I worked on when I was at Sheffield Hallam with a lot of the staff there was looking at some kind of a meaningful learning experience in the first 6 weeks. It's the first 6 weeks in which students drop out of university. That's when they disengage. If they haven't got it by then, you've lost them for a long time. If you can give them something really meaningful in the first 6 weeks, and it's up to you what you think about meaningful, but again, hopefully some of the examples will explain that. But if you give them a really meaningful learning experience in those first 6 weeks, it will drive them. I used to wonder why students came in to study engineering. And when they came in, the learning environment was the lecture, the tutorial, and the practical class. And it was full of lectures and full of problems classes, hard sums, maths. These people wanted to build things, they wanted to make things, they wanted to design things. And I used to say to the other academic staff in the department, why do they want to be an engineer? When they come in, can we get them to behave like engineers? So can we give them something to design, something to fix, something to break? So now they're behaving like engineers. One of my colleagues did a wonderful thing a number of years ago. He sent them all down to the pound shop. Do you have a pound shop here? Yeah. Sent them all down to the pound shop and he said, I want you to bring something back from the pound shop. When they did that, he organised them into groups and he said, I want you to take that thing that you've just bought and tell me, where is it most likely to fail? And secondly, how could you improve the design of that it won't fail that way? So now they're behaving like engineers, like mechanical engineers. So in their first experience is one of the subject that they've come into. I had another colleague who told me about students on a jewellery design course, and their first task was to make a paper mache mask. I thought, jewellery? Do they not want to make jewellery? Do they not want to design something that's to do with jewellery? And I was told that they don't get to make jewellery until their second year. That doesn't seem to be a very meaningful first year experience for them. So if you can think of something exciting for them to do in the first couple of weeks, a competition, a debate, an investigation, something to design, to build, to make, to create in the first 6 weeks, that really will get them motivated. And that motivation will last for a long time. Give them opportunity to develop their self-management skills, their study skills, their problem-solving skills. Let them solve problems. Give them problems to sort out. Give them topics or scenarios to investigate. Give them a debate. Give them projects or investigations that may require 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, perhaps in a group. So they have to manage the project. They have to learn those management skills. Now you may need to start small with some of these things. There may be things that they do simply in class. But they start to develop these skills in a small way in class. And as they develop the skills and as we repeat, the experience gets bigger and gets longer. And I'll come back to that concept shortly as well. How to develop their stickability. Students quite often expect, because they don't think things should be very complex, they expect to be able to find the answer first time. And if they don't get the answer, they give up. And yet you may look at that and think, no, that can work. That just needs a little adjustment here or a tweak there or a little bit of working on something. So you need to be able to find ways of encouraging them to stick at something. We've come into this society of instant gratification. And we think we deserve things and we should just be able to get things, as soon as we want them. We don't have to work at it. We don't have to stick at it. And that's something we have to encourage them to keep working at things, keep trying them again and again, failing again and again, but eventually they will get there. So give them those opportunities to develop self-management skills and think about how you might do that in the classroom in the first year. But also their professional skills, working in groups, working on group projects, managing meetings. They're really bad at that, I find, first time they try it. But they get good very quickly. But they need to go around the cycle several times. Their interpersonal skills, their ability to negotiate with one another, to make decisions, handling conflict. If one part of a group thinks one thing, another part thinks another, how do they handle that? How do they debate that? How do they discuss that and come to a shared agreement? And their communication skills, which is not just presentation skills. It's about being able to question, being able to listen to other people, the whole range of communication skills. Teach in ways that recognise and stretch their present learning styles. Honey and Mumford, a number of you said, yeah, you know Honey and you've come across Honey and Mumford. Yeah, a few heads nodding. They talk about 4 different learning styles. And again, think about how you relate to that. The theorist, the pragmatist, the activist, and the reflector. When I asked you to do something at the beginning of the session, who was the quickest one to turn to their neighbour and start to talk and do things? Who was the first one to write something down? Those are the activists. You ask the students to get themselves into groups and do a task. The activist is the first one on their feet. They'll get in, they'll do it. They're very quick to undertake tasks. Theorist is the one who wants to know about the topic. They want the theories, they want to read the books, they will go to the library and they will find the information that's needed and they'll be able to recite that information back to you. They've got the theories. The pragmatist is someone who says, well, so what? Where does that theory apply? Does it work in this situation? Why doesn't it work over there? It doesn't seem to apply it over here. How can I use this? They're very pragmatic about it. And the reflector is the person who sits very quietly in the group and doesn't really say an awful lot, but they listen to the whole story and they start making connections between different bits. And towards the end, you will see they've come up with a model, maybe a picture if they're a visual learner. They'll come up with a model. And you probably come across these people if you've been working in a group project. The activist is the one who, right, okay, let's do this, let's get this, and they're away. And there's somebody in the group who says nothing or doesn't seem to contribute until about 45 minutes into the 1-hour session. And then they say, hang on a minute, why did we start there? Should we not have done this? And you think, why couldn't you have said that half an hour ago? But the point was they couldn't, because they had to make the connections. They had to reflect on what was happening. And those are really important people to listen to, because they have important messages. But in a group, you might want to find how you would encourage them to speak out a little bit sooner. Reflectors are generally successful in written assignments, because that's when they get the chance to reflect on what they've learned and feed it back to you. Activists will be quite good at presentations or building things or making things. So again, we've got this range of different learning styles, and you might think for yourself, what am I? What's your preference? What's your learning style, your preferred learning style? But if we think about moving on to the Kolb learning cycle, some of you said you'd come across the Kolb learning cycle, and it's a cycle of learning, and you can start anywhere in the cycle really that you like. As a teacher, you might get the students to do something, make something, build something, try something out. And you're starting with the doing phase of that cycle. Then you might ask them to think about what they've just achieved, what they've done, how it worked for them, how it could have been better. So they're thinking. Then you can talk to them about the theory that underpins what they've just been doing, what they've been learning about. And then you might ask them to do another task just to underpin that theory or to reinforce it or to move on, and they go around that cycle again. Or you might start at a different point of that cycle. You might give them the theory and then say, right, I'd like you to plan an experiment to test that theory. Will that work? And they would plan it, then they would do it, and then you would ask them, well, did it work? Did it meet the theory? Where was it not appropriate? How might the theory be refined or developed or contextualized? So you can start that cycle anywhere you like, but it's a learning cycle. It's a very effective learning cycle. If you bring those two concepts together, you find that theorists are very good at the theorizing, the abstract conceptualization phase of that cycle. Pragmatists are very good at the planning stage. Activists function well in the doing stage, and reflectors work well at the thinking stage. But to be able to go around the cycle, you need to be able to do all of those things. So, but very briefly, some principles. It wants to be fast. People like immediate feedback. I don't know if you have an institutional requirement on feedback on assessed work, for example, but a lot of universities in England have a 2-week deadline. Some of them it's 3 weeks. And for me, the problem with that is that a lot of staff convert the word deadline into the word target. So they don't say, that's the longest time I have to provide this feedback to students. They say, that's what I will aim to do, get it back in 2 weeks. So the students don't get it back for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And by then they've forgotten, they've moved on, they're on to other things. So feedback needs to be constant and fast and rapid. It needs to be developmental. When you're giving them feedback, focus on how they can improve the next time. Think about improvement with your feedback. Make your feedback relevant. Relevant to what? Relevant to the goals of the task, relevant to the learning outcomes. Keep it focused. If you're providing feedback on hundreds of things and you're writing all over their script or you're giving them lots of feedback, they won't be able to take it in. They'll only be able to take in 2 or 3 or 4 really important points. So focus on the real key things that you can say to the students that will improve their learning. Focus on those and give them that feedback and make it personal to the student. The student wants to feel you're talking to them. Give time to feedback. It's not just about giving feedback on assignments. It's about giving feedback in class. If a student makes a contribution in class, even if it's a nonsense or even if it's, in your opinion, wrong, thank them. Repeat it back to the rest of the class. So you're rewarding them for the very fact that they made a contribution. That's feedback. If it's assignments, they spend a lot of time doing an assignment, so it's only fair that you should put a similar amount of effort into giving them some feedback on it. And think about other places where you can be giving feedback to the students. You might want to design assessments in stages, particularly if there are regulations over the number of assignments you're allowed to give in a module. But think about staging the assignment so that you can give them feedback at every different stage as they're going along. Think about development portfolios, reflective logs, that kind of thing, where they're maintaining those on an ongoing basis and they're getting ongoing feedback from you. So think about one of the major things I can do to help my students learn is give them feedback, not give them information. And finally, constantly evaluate what you're doing. Have you come across the 3-minute questionnaire? It's very easy to put that up on the screen at the end of a lecture, at the end of a workshop, at the end of a studio session or a practical session. What was the most useful or meaningful thing that you learned during this session? And have them write it down. What questions remain uppermost in your mind as we end the session? And what was the thing that you didn't understand? That helps them think about what they're learning, what they're getting out of it, what they want to find out. And you can ask them to feed that back to you, or any of their responses to that, feed it back to you, and you'll deal with them. And particularly the last one, the muddiest point in the session, if they tell you that, and you come back in next week and say, a number of you were a bit confused over X, Y, or Z, we're going to talk about that again. They feel that there's value in giving you that feedback and giving you that information. Very quick, easy thing to do at the end of a session. You don't have to do it at every session, but maybe once a fortnight or so to do something like that, just to get some feedback from the students so you know whether they're learning what you're hoping that they're learning. Have you come across the stop, start, continue? Ask the students to write down what they should stop doing because it inhibits their learning. Ask them to think about that. What gets in the way of your learning? Well, not coming to class, staying out too late the night before, not spending enough time looking up the information in the library, or not spending enough time on the assignment. Lots of things they might write in there. Let them think about it for themselves. What should they start doing that will improve the learning? Come to class. Whatever, but lots of things there. It's not necessarily the opposite. And what things are they doing at the moment that's working well for them? You can get them to reflect on that, maintain that, and feed that back to you. But also, you might ask them to do the same thing for you. What would they like you to stop doing? That's a bit scary. What would you like me to start doing? And what things am I currently doing that work for you? Get that information from them, and that will help you to improve constantly, and it will help them to improve. It helps them become more reflective, and encourages their metacognition. So those are the 10 goals that I've suggested that we need to think about. It's a lot to take in. There are links between them all. But if I may just indulge for a couple of minutes and just look at a couple of case studies. Occupational therapy. This was a lecture at Sheffield Hallam. It was a first year 10 credit module in the first semester. The students that arrived had very little confidence in Blackboard. Do you use Blackboard here? It's a virtual learning environment. Do you use Moodle? Similar thing. And they saw it mostly as a repository for information. So the lecturer concerned wanted to develop opportunities to work with upper year students, final year students, so that they could recap on their first year experience and provide support for them. So those are the reasons why they introduced this this little experience. About, 50 or 60 students in the class, organised into 6 groups of about 8 or 10. So it's a fairly decent sized group of students. It was a 3-week experience. It's 7 hours of formal contact each week, an hour's lecture, 2 practical sessions, and 1 workshop. What they did was, as I suggested earlier, they said, let's give you some authentic, realistic, meaningful experience here. You're coming in here to study physiotherapy. What about dementia of Alzheimer's type 2? There's been a fire in the flat. The client is unkempt, malnourished. And the question is there a progression of dementia with this person, mature person? And they were asked to assess the function and future care needs of that person and provide a program of structured activity to increase socialization. In their first week, they're giving something meaningful, something complex, and they're not told the answers. The third-year students, they were volunteers, and they role-played. They role-played people like the carer, the warden, the client. So, of course, the warden is completely fed up with this client, this person living there who's constantly causing the warden concerns. So the warden is going to say, this person really needs to be hospitalised. They're not telling the truth. And that's what happens in the real world. And the academic staff played the role of the multidisciplinary team. So they were there as the experts to give the advice and the feedback to the students on the experience. So 2 sessions a week, as I said. First week, the students would receive the referral of this client referral. In the second session, the third-year students were there in role. They were able to interview them, discuss with them, find out a little bit more about this client, find out what was going on, identify the gaps in their understanding, and then go off and find the information that they needed. Second week, they developed questions that they would want to ask of the multidisciplinary team, consolidate what they knew, and then in the third week, suddenly, a consultant called an emergency meeting to assess their findings. And in the second session, they were asked to present a treatment plan. The consolidation in the third week was done on Blackboard. And the treatment plan was done in a goldfish bowl. 2 reps from the group were interviewed by the consultant, while the rest of the group sat in a circle round them. And if the students didn't know the answer, they could take a time out and ask the rest of the group to help them out. And that was a 3-week inquiry-based learning experience. You can see how that's completely different, I hope, from what you might normally have expected in that kind of a subject area. It's a really meaningful experience. The students were working in groups. They were given a task, but they could set their own boundaries to that task. They had to go and find the information for themselves, find out what do we know about this, what do we need to find out, who can we find out the information from, the students, the multidisciplinary team, the literature, and then they had to present their findings. Second case study briefly, computer science. First year professional skills development. This was at Manchester University with what was initially 120 students and then went up to 250 when the 2 universities merged. So a very large class. Small groups, between 6 and 8 students per group. So a large number of tutors involved in it. And the idea was to ease the students into this process gradually, going round this cycle again and again and again. It was a whole year approach in phases. The first phase, which of course being computer scientists they called it phase 0, was a 2-hour workshop session in class. The students were organised in groups and it essentially discussed those expectations, those standards that I talked about as the first tool. What skills would be expected, ground rules for the group, and they were asked to come up with their own ground rules for how the groups would work together. That was an in-class session. The second phase of the cycle, they were introduced to the concept of software patents, and they were asked to organise a debate where half the group would say that patents were a good thing, and the other half were to argue that they were not. They went off during the week between classes to find the information to support their argument. They came back the following week and held their debate. So that was a 2-week experience. The next phase was a 3-week experience. They were introduced to a case study of the killer robot, a robot that killed someone. And they were asked to think about the ethics of computing software. And over the next 3 weeks, they were asked to develop a set of ethical ground rules that they would use in their group project. So now it's 3 weeks. So they're able to come back in the middle week, consolidate what they'd already found, go away and then get the rest of the information and agree their ethical framework on the 3rd week. The next phase was 6 weeks, where they were asked to build a database-driven website. They tended to be split. They were allowed to choose any kind of design of website they liked. That was their choice. About half of the groups developed websites around cheap, nutritious food for students. They developed websites that would tell the student, you want to make spaghetti bolognese, here are the shops to go to buy the ingredients, this is how much it will cost you, and here's the nutritional value of it. The other half, any guesses? Dating agencies. But that was their choice, and they built websites around those. And they had to present, there was a group presentation and a poster presentation just before Christmas where they had to say, this is the design of the website, here's the database that will drive it, here's how it will work, here's how it will interact, here's the human interface with it, etc., etc., etc. And that was a major assignment for them. The staff went away after watching these presentations and got into a huddle and said, they're never going to be able to build these websites, they're far too complex. And the last phase was the whole of the second semester, where they had 12 weeks to build their website. Half of the students had their websites built by the end of January, before the second semester started. And the staff suddenly realized that these guys were so much better than they thought they were. I remember one of them saying to me, we would never have asked them to do anything as difficult as this, and yet they've done it. They've done it on their own. Students often take on much bigger challenges when they're allowed to choose their own topics. They will take on a much bigger challenge. They'll do something much more difficult than we would ever give them. So those are two case studies that kind of give you a feeling for the way some people have been trying to work in the first year. Different approach. It doesn't have to be all done this way. But if you wanted to start, I would start in the first week. Managing those expectations, setting clear goals and standards, building on what they already know, working through those 10 levers to encourage a different approach to their learning, a different approach to your teaching, and hopefully developing the kind of skills that will benefit them in the second year and in the final year of their studies. So, thank you for listening to me.
Folks, thank you very much. I'm just going to take over from Anne for a second because I have a couple of housekeeping bits to do. Just on behalf of the people here, just say a very special thank you to Ivan. Really opened up some interesting thinking and on teaching and learning. And I know some of the stuff some of us will have heard before and some of us might be new, but it's always interesting to see it, you know, concisely put and given a framework for us so that we can actually say, well, okay, yeah, that's actually, I can go and use that. I can go and deal with that. I can bring that stuff into my classroom. So that's great. So thank you very much. Now, I'm conscious of time. It's now 20 to 11, so there's a cup of coffee outside. It's a little bit chilly in here. I know there's heating on, but it's a big room. So there's a nice cup of coffee and tea hopefully outside in the foyer when we go, just outside the room here. At 11 o'clock, we move then to the other end of the building. There are 3 rooms on the B floor, so if you go down the street, down the main part of, for those who are not familiar with LIT, and up the stairs at the room, I'll be able to go down there for 11 o'clock. And there are 3 rooms there, 3 small lecture halls, and we'll set up the workshops and the parallel sessions in those 3 rooms. So each of you will be able to get to 2 of the 3 sessions. Or you can skip in and out if you want to, and then it's really up to yourself. Just one piece of information in the middle block. Thanks very much.